It happened in a moment that didn't feel like a moment at all, more like a dull slice, a silent break in the world she knew. Her uncle's voice, gravelly and too loud, echoed through the sterile silence of the ICU. "She's your sister, works in a hospital, and still couldn't do a damn thing." The words dropped like a scalpel on tile, sharp, clean, and cold. Meredith stood in the corner, a phantom in scrubs, staring at her family through glass, the dividing line between what she was and what they believed she could never be, her parents. Didn't flinch. Not once did they turn to her with a look of protest or even surprise. They just bowed their heads slightly, as if ashamed but not of the man who said it. Ashamed of her. That day, her younger sister Chloe had collapsed suddenly. Cardiac rupture, the doctor said. 33 years old, healthy by all appearances, but sometimes the body betrays itself in an instant. Chloe was their shining girl, their darling, the favorite everyone admitted without shame. Even now, as she lay unconscious, pale against white sheets, tubes, and wires feeding her fragile life, it was Chloe who was spoken of like royalty, and Meredith who was treated like the help. No one asked Meredith if she was okay. No one asked if she had eaten or slept. She was simply there, a figure in the background, as she'd always been, even as a child. Meredith had known how the hierarchy of love worked in their family. She wasn't delusional. She didn't suffer under the fantasy that one day they would change. From the moment she could understand the way her mother's hands lingered longer on Chloe's curls, or the way her father's eyes gleamed when Ethan scored a goal at soccer practice, Meredith had known her role. She was the spare, the extra, the afterthought. She was never in the family Christmas letters, never included in introductions at church gatherings, and never brought into conversations unless it involved tutoring, cleaning, or stepping in to protect the image of the family. Even when she earned scholarships, even when she graduated at the top of her class, even when she pulled 3-day shifts to care for strangers and carried surgical instruments with unflinching hands, none of it was enough. It wasn't Chloe. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't what her parents wanted to be proud of. Still, she persisted. Still, she stayed. Still, she loved them quietly, consistently, invisibly, now as she stood in the quiet hallway outside the ICU. She pressed one hand against the cool glass separating her from her sister. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her heart didn't race. She had already done what they said she couldn't. Meredith Rowe had saved Chloe's life. The operating room had been a controlled chaos. 7 hours under sterile lights, the whine of machines. The hum of urgency. The attending on call wasn't available. The other neurosurgeon was still in transit. So Meredith had said yes before the nurse finished reading the case. A young woman in her 30s, victim of a vehicular accident, suspected intracranial hemorrhage. When she opened the file and saw the name Chloe Rowe, she paused. Just once, her heart dropped in her chest like a swallowed stone. Then she kept moving. There wasn't time for grief, not for hesitation. Not for the tangled knots of the past. Chloe needed a surgeon. She had one. Meredith didn't tell the team. She didn't tell the charge nurse, the anesthesiologist, or the residents scrubbing. In beside her, there was no place for personal stories in an OR, and she had learned long ago that emotion, her own or anyone else's, was the first thing to kill precision. So she stitched her feelings shut and tucked them under the crisp white of her coat. She told the team only what they needed to know. She was leading the procedure. That was enough. When Chloe was wheeled into the operating room, her head was partially shaved, her face a pale mask of everything she used to be vibrant, loud, unapologetically adored. Now she was still. Her vitals were unstable. The CT scan showed a large hematoma pressing on the brainstem. It had to be drained fast. Pressure had to be relieved. Every second counted. One wrong move, and Chloe wouldn't wake up, or worse, she'd wake up someone else entirely. Meredith didn't falter. The first incision was made, the skull carefully exposed. She drilled. She clamped the bleeding vessels. She reduced the swelling. And all the while her mind drifted not in distraction, but in memory. She remembered being 8 years old and taking the blame for a shattered vase. Chloe had been the one who broke it, dancing through the hallway in her princess dress. But Meredith had stepped forward when their mother's voice turned sharp. "I did it," she said. Her mother never questioned her, just nodded with that look of irritation, of disappointment. "You're her sister," she said. "That's what you're supposed to do. No praise, no thank you." Just the burden of the role she never asked for. She remembered that moment as she placed the final stitch. The surgery had gone perfectly. Meredith had done what only a few surgeons in the state could do under pressure. She didn't smile, she didn't cry. She just removed her gloves, stepped back from the table, and breathed when the attending physician later informed the family that the lead surgeon had performed exceptional work. The relief was palpable. Until the question came, "Who did the surgery?" Her mother asked, "Please, we just want to thank them." The nurse hesitated, unsure. Then a younger one, oblivious to the emotional weight of what she was about to say, smiled.
"It was
Dr. Rowe, her sister, actually? The silence that followed was deafening. Meredith didn't wait for the fallout. She walked away. The next morning she returned to the ICU, her white coat crisp, her badge clipped. Clipboard and hand armor for the battlefield she never got credit for entering. She requested not to interact directly. Clinical boundaries, she claimed. But really, she just didn't know who she was supposed to be anymore. Her sister surgeon? The forgotten daughter? Or the ghost who lived in the spaces between? From behind the observation glass, she watched Chloe stir, eyes fluttering, mouth twitching as she mumbled for water. The nurse wiped her lips. Chloe drifted back to sleep. It was around 9:40 a.m. when she heard their voices. Her parents, Ethan. They entered the ICU like royalty arriving at a funeral. Faces pinched with fear, hands clenched with desperation. Her mother rushed to Chloe's side. "Sweetheart," she cooed. "You're okay, baby, you're okay."
Ethan.
Stood tall, eyes scanning the room like he could shield them with his presence. Her father's voice, low and gravelly, asked the nurse for updates. No one saw Meredith, standing just outside the window. Then came the question again. Who did the surgery? Meredith stood still. The younger nurse answered again. It was Dr. Rowe, her sister. Her mother's eyes scanned the room, found her through the glass. Their eyes locked for half a second. Recognition, disbelief, something close to guilt. Meredith didn't blink. She just turned and walked away. They followed her, of course. Caught up with her in the courtyard where she sat with hospital coffee. In hand, her mother didn't sit close. Just enough to say, "Why didn't you tell us?" Meredith sipped her coffee. "Because if you knew," she said, "you would have asked for someone else." "That's not true," her mother replied, but the words rang hollow. Ethan spoke then, voice cracking. "Thank you." Meredith didn't flinch. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I just needed her to live." She left them there, in the courtyard, stunned and wordless. She didn't need applause. She didn't need credit. She had already saved Chloe's life. That was enough. Or so she told herself. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, innocuous, folded into a cream-colored envelope, her mother's handwriting swirling in elaborate cursive across the front. It had been sitting untouched on the corner of Meredith's kitchen table for nearly 2 weeks. She hadn't opened it. Not because she was busy, though she could have used that excuse. Not because she was afraid, though a part of her would have admitted that too. But because she already knew what it said. She imagined the contents perfectly. Sunday dinner at 6. Chloe will be there, Ethan too. And if Dr. Meredith Rowe can spare the time, the phrasing never changed. Formal, detached, like an invitation sent to a distinguished acquaintance rather than a daughter. Not our Meredith, not your sister, just Meredith. As if she were the neighbor's girl who sometimes showed up to mow the lawn. Her apartment in Portland was quiet, spotless, more machine than home, just the way she liked it. 12-hour shifts, microwave meals, silence. It suited her. Meredith had traded mésages for control, unpredictability for precision. She didn't have framed family photos or holiday garlands or scented candles, but she did have order. And she had the hospital. That day, she had performed a high-risk tumor resection on a 70-year-old man. His granddaughter wept when she told them the operation was a success. The old man had hugged her through tears, his arms trembling against her back. "You're a miracle," he had whispered. She had smiled because he meant it. Then she went home, heated a frozen lasagna, and ate in silence while a show played in the background she wasn't really watching. There were no miracles here. Redwood, Oregon, the town where she was raised, was only a couple of hours south, but it felt like another country. Neatly trimmed lawns, choir practice, PTA meetings. Her parents, Ellen and Joseph, had always been prominent pillars of their community, staunch churchgoers. Community organizers, the type of people who smiled in public and whispered behind closed doors. They had 3 children, and if anyone asked, they'd say it proudly. But when the stories came out, they were always about Chloe's high school crown, Ethan's scholarship, Chloe's fashion blog, Ethan's wedding. Meredith's name was never mentioned unless it came with context. She's the doctor. A utility, not a daughter. She once overheard her mother at a church bake sale say, "Meredith is very smart." A bit too smart, cold as granite, that one. She had been 13 at the time and had gone home that night to look up the word granite. Strong, unmoving, alone. There was a photo in her wallet, worn at the corners from her medical school. Graduation. She stood stiff in her white coat, holding a certificate of academic excellence. Her father lingered in the background, almost smiling. Her mother hadn't attended. Chloe had prom that night. That was the first time Meredith realized. Some people don't forget you. They erase you. She sat on the edge of her bed that Friday night, staring down at her phone, the unread letter still in reach. A text had just come in from Ethan. "Dinner this Sunday. Chloe's flying in. Mom said if Meredith's not too busy, she can come, not, we hope you'll come. Not even Chloe would love to see you. Just an if statement, conditional." As if Meredith were an afterthought. A caveat. She scrolled social media absently. Someone from high school had posted photos with Chloe, stopped by Aunt Ellen's. Chloe's still gorgeous and sweet as ever. Her sister, I think she's a doctor or something. The caption stabbed deeper than she expected. Not because they didn't remember, but because that was exactly how Meredith lived now. The sister people forgot to mention. Later that night, she pulled out an old photo from a shoebox in her closet. It was a beach trip, the 3 of them as kids, Meredith around 7, Chloe 4, covered in sand, laughing with wild abandon. Meredith stood beside her, serious-faced, eyes fixed on the camera like she could already see the storm coming. Sometimes she wondered if she vanished completely. How long it would take for them to notice. The call came late. She was minutes from clocking out, already halfway through her sign-out notes when her pager went off. That transfer from Rose Valley General. Female 33 GCS 7. Suspected intracranial hemorrhage after MVA. Are you available? She said yes without thinking. Didn't ask for a name. Didn't need one until the chart flashed across her screen. Chloe Rowe. The name hit her harder than she expected. She stared at it, fingers suspended above the keyboard. The pieces came together. The crash, the city, the ex-boyfriend who still lived in Rose Valley. She didn't ask for details. She didn't have to. She didn't tell the team either. The residents, the nurses, the anesthesiologist, they had no idea. She gave instructions like she always did. Calm, clear, clinical. But when she scrubbed it in, her heart was beating out a silent war beneath her coat. They wheeled Chloe in. Her head was shaved in patches, dried blood crusted behind her ear. Her vitals were tanking. The CT confirmed it, a hematoma near the brain. STEM. Time was running out. 7 hours. 7 hours of delicate, exacting chaos. The drill buzzed. The scalpel sliced. The suction pulled away fluid as her team navigated inside Chloe's brain. Any slip, any single hesitation, and Meredith would be the one who destroyed her sister instead of saving her. But she didn't falter. When the last clamp was placed and the swelling relieved, Meredith looked down at her sister's face and remembered the weight of 30 years of silence. All the birthdays she wasn't called for, the holidays she wasn't mentioned, the graduations she watched from the back row. And still, here she was, holding her life in her hands. "I didn't do it for you," she whispered. No one heard. But she said it anyway. The next morning, she returned to check Chloe's progress. Officially, she told the staff it was part of post-op monitoring. Unofficially, she couldn't let go. Chloe was groggy, barely awake, but stable. Meredith stood outside the ICU window and watched as her chest rose and fell in slow, steady rhythm. Then the doors slid open. Her parents walked in. Ellen, with her pearl earrings and worried frown. Joseph, stoic and slow. Ethan, tense beside them. They didn't see Meredith standing just feet away behind the glass. Her mother rushed to the bed. "You're okay, baby. You're okay." Ethan asked questions. Her father listened quietly. Then came the question Meredith had been waiting for. Who did the surgery? The nurse hesitated. Then a younger one piped up with a smile, oblivious to the emotional minefield. Dr. Rowe, her sister actually. She was incredible. The silence that followed might have split the earth. Ellen's eyes searched the room until they locked with Meredith's, and Meredith walked away. Meredith didn't rush as she left the ICU. Her feet moved in steady, deliberate steps down the polished hallway, past bulletin boards pinned with children's drawings and staff appreciation flyers. The world around her remained unchanged, routine. Sterile, but something inside her cracked open and began to shift. She had just saved Chloe's life. Her mother had looked her in the eye and still said nothing. It shouldn't have surprised her. And yet the hollowness inside her chest deepened in a way she couldn't quite control. She ended up in the hospital's courtyard. Coffee in hand, cold and bitter. She sipped it anyway. The sky above was turning. A dull gray, clouds hanging low and full, like they too were burdened by unspoken truths. It didn't take long for her family to find her. Her mother approached first, her movements unsure for the first time in Meredith's memory. She sat on the bench beside her, not touching her, not speaking right away. Meredith didn't look over. She focused on the withered leaves scattered across the concrete. "Why didn't you tell us it was you?" Ellen finally asked. Her voice was soft, not accusatory, but confused. Small. Meredith kept her eyes forward. "Because if you knew, you would have asked for someone else." Ellen turned sharply. "That's not true." Meredith looked at her then. "Really looked, isn't it?" she asked. "You've spent your whole life believing Chloe needed protecting. And me? I was just the cold one, the clinical one, the one who always went too far, too smart, too serious." Her mother blinked and looked away, her hands folded in her lap like she was holding something fragile she didn't understand. Ethan stepped forward next, words trembling at the edges of his mouth. "Thank you," he said, 2 words. But the crack in his voice made them matter more. Joseph nodded from behind him, silent, the way he always was when he didn't know what to say. Meredith stood. "I don't need credit," she said. "I just needed her to live." She walked away without waiting for a reply. The email came the next day through the hospital's internal system. It was brief, clinical, and CC'd to half the neurology department. "Patient Chloe Rowe has been moved to general recovery. Vitals stable. Prognosis positive." Attached beneath was a second email, forwarded from the family coordinator's office. The Rowe family would like to extend an invitation to a small thank you lunch, honoring the team who cared for their daughter. Hosted in the hospital's south atrium. It hadn't been sent directly to her. Just filtered through the system like she was anyone else. She stared at the message for several long moments, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she clicked. Accept. The lunch was modest round tables with thin white linens, a buffet with lukewarm pasta and rolls, soft jazz piped in through portable speakers. A printed banner hung across one wall. "Thank you for saving Chloe," in bold navy letters. Like a school science fair, Meredith stood quietly at the edge of the room, glass of flat lemonade in hand, dressed in the same navy blazer she'd worn during her final residency presentation. No one spoke to her. No one looked twice. She blended in like an extra in someone else's celebration. Ellen eventually stood to give a speech. Her voice was calm. "Practiced. Our family is deeply grateful to the incredible team who brought our daughter back to us," she said. "We will never forget the skill and compassion that carried her through those darkest hours." Her gaze passed over the crowd but didn't stop on Meredith. To each of you who helped, thank you. You saved her life. Applause, brief, polite. Meredith didn't clap. An older nurse leaned in beside her. Strange, she whispered. I thought they'd say your name. Meredith smiled faintly. I'm used to being invisible. As the gathering wound down, she walked toward the exit, past the stairwell where balloons were still tied to the railing. Ethan caught up with her just outside the doors. His shirt collar was wrinkled, his face flushed. You're not mad? He asked. Meredith paused, her fingers wrapping tightly around the glass in her hand. I didn't do it for her, she said. But well, did it because it was the right thing. She didn't say the rest. That part of her, the part that still hoped for acknowledgement, had waited the entire speech for one sentence. That's her. But it never came. She went back to work. The next day, her phone buzzed with a voicemail from the Oregon State Medical Board. She returned the call standing in a stairwell between patient rounds. Dr. Rowe, the woman on the line, said, We're pleased to inform you that you've been shortlisted for the State Surgical Leadership Committee. The announcement will be public next week. Congratulations. Meredith stood there, unmoving, the sterile tiles cold beneath her shoes. Recognition, from people who judged her for her work, not her role in a family album. Later, walking past a row of rooms in the recovery wing, she saw her mother through the glass. Ellen sat beside Chloe's bed, gently wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. Chloe blinked awake just barely, her eyes glazed and tired. Then they found Meredith. Their gazes locked, Chloe's weak, confused, unreadable. Meredith stopped for just a moment. Then she walked on. I could save her life, Meredith thought. But I can't make her remember me. I can't make her want to. A week later, an envelope arrived again. This one was blue, formal, embossed in silver ink. From the State Medical Innovation Board, a roundtable invitation. Meredith almost tossed it aside until she saw her name not as an attendee but as a featured panelist. A keynote speaker. She didn't want to go. Not really. She didn't want to speak about strength while her own scars were still healing. But she went anyway. Because even if her voice shook, she still had something worth saying. The room was crowded bright. Lights, bright faces, voices laced with ambition. Meredith stood at the podium, her hands steady. She spoke of invisible labor, of women who succeeded in silence, of daughters who endured. The applause afterward was generous. But what stunned her wasn't the clapping. It was Chloe, sitting in the back row. Thin from her recovery, hair still patchy, her eyes searching for something. When their eyes met, Chloe stood. Her voice cracked as she whispered, You're not invisible, Meredith, not to me. Meredith smiled faintly but didn't answer. Not yet. Later that evening, Chloe approached her near the lobby. Coffee? She asked, voice low. Just us? Meredith hesitated, then nodded. They found a small cafe down the street, dusty wooden tables, chipped mugs, faded indie music in the background. They sat in a booth by the window, the kind of spot Chloe used to love. For a while, neither spoke. Then Chloe looked up. Do you remember when I fell down the stairs? I was 6. You were the one who bandaged my knee. Meredith blinked. You remember that? Chloe nodded. I told you it hurt, and you said pain was just nerves sending a message. You were shaking, but you tried to help. Then Mom walked in and told you to stop playing nurse. Meredith said nothing. That moment had been buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it. But Chloe remembered. I used to tell people you never did anything for me, Chloe whispered. That you didn't care, but I was wrong. Meredith met her eyes. You weren't wrong, she said. I wasn't kind, I was angry. I was tired, I was trying to prove I deserved to exist. The silence between them didn't sting this time. It softened. As they left, Chloe hugged her. Meredith stood still at first. Then slowly she lifted her arms and returned it. For the first time in years, Meredith saw Chloe not as the favorite, or the rival, or the girl in every family photo, just as a woman, a sister, someone who had also been lost. When she returned home, there was another email waiting. The hospital's annual recognition ceremony. Dr. Meredith Rowe, guest of honor. There would be plaques, a video montage, the usual, but the real story, estranged. Sister saves her own *** had already leaked to a small medical journal. It began circulating quietly online. Meredith never responded to the article. But someone else did. Ellen. The phone call was sharp, brittle. Are you trying to humiliate?
Mm,
She demanded. You couldn't just stay quiet? Meredith didn't raise her voice. I didn't ask to be written about. I was invited to speak. I told the truth. If the truth embarrasses you, maybe that's not my burden. There was a long pause. Then the line went dead. She didn't call back. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel guilty. 3 days after the call with her mother, Meredith received a message from Liam. Found this in the archives. Thought you'd want it. Attached was a scanned photo of a crumpled essay, dated and yellowing at the edges. Her high school handwriting filled the page in stiff, precise lettering. The title, The Hero in My Life, she had forgotten about it. She was 17 then, bitter, exhausted, already too familiar with silence and shadows. But the words struck her like a bell rung. From another lifetime, my little sister has a light I never had. But if she ever needed it, I'd be the steady darkness beneath her feet to help her shine. Meredith blinked at the screen. Her fingers traced the curve of her younger self's pen strokes like she was touching a ghost. She didn't remember writing it, but it felt honest. Like a promise made before resentment buried kindness beneath duty. 2 days later, she stood on the front porch of her childhood home. The house hadn't changed. The bricks were the same red-brown. The white trim had yellowed slightly, and the mailbox still squeaked when opened. But standing there now, she realized she had changed. When Ellen answered the door, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. I'm here to see the patient, Meredith said calmly. Not you. Ellen stepped aside wordlessly. Meredith moved through the hall like a visitor in a museum. The smell of lemon polish still clung to the wooden floors, and the family portraits still hung in their same careful order. Chloe front and center, Ethan flanking one side. Her own image tucked into the edge of a group photo with her face half obscured by someone else's elbow. In the bedroom, Chloe was propped up against pillows, her hair tied back, a gentle smile on her face. I've been remembering things, she said softly. Little things. Times you were there, but I didn't see it. Meredith sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. I don't need you to remember, she said. I just need you to live. Outside, the sun dipped low, throwing golden shadows across the room. Chloe leaned back against the pillows, her eyes soft with something Meredith didn't recognize. At first. Peace. For the first time, she felt it. 2. The memorial service was held at Grand Redwood Hall, the same place their family had reserved for every important event. From weddings to retirements.
no.
It was for the farewell of the only man who had ever truly seen Meredith. Her grandfather. He had been the only one who listened. The only one who told her she was more than enough long before she believed it herself. She had promised him. Once sitting together on the back porch, drinking lemonade as the Oregon summer buzzed around them. I won't let them define me. And so she went. Not for them, for him. The room was dressed in lilac and legacy. Every table featured a photo collage, each more curated than the last. Ethan had an entire board football graduation, his wedding. Chloe's collage was practically a shrine. Meredith found one photo. A childhood shot of all 3 siblings. On the beach. She stood in the middle, but her face was half cut out by the edge of the frame. Someone nearby leaned in and asked, Who's that in the middle? Oh, her mother replied without hesitation, some distant cousin. Meredith didn't flinch. She'd built her whole life around not flinching. When Ellen rose to speak, her voice was gentle, controlled. We gather today not just to remember a great man, but to honor the family he built. Chloe, whose strength inspires us. Ethan, whose support anchors us. And of course, the gifted doctors who helped save Chloe's life. She never said Meredith's name. Ethan leaned forward like he was going to speak, but his wife placed a hand on his arm and he stopped. Then, from the corner of the room, an old voice rose. I just want to say something. Everyone turned. It was Uncle Robert, her grandfather's brother. Frail but unafraid. I want to thank my niece, Dr. Meredith Rowe, for saving Chloe's life, he said. Seems like the family forgot. The room went still. Someone set their wine glass down too hard. Someone else coughed. Ellen gave a tight-lipped smile. Well, was her job, wasn't it? That was it. That was the moment Meredith knew she had to speak. She stood. Not out of anger, not even out of pain, but out of necessity. It wasn't a job, she said. It was family, and it's time I spoke. All eyes turned to her. She felt her grandfather's voice in her bones, steadying her spine. I've sat at this table for years unnamed. I've watched birthdays, weddings, holidays where I was the extra seat, the last-minute mention. You called me the cold one, the distant one, the girl who never smiled in photos. She paused. No one interrupted, but I've spent years saving strangers, giving everything I had to people who needed me. And when Chloe was dying, I didn't hesitate. Not because I needed validation, but because I still loved her, even after everything. Ellen's eyes narrowed. I'm not here asking for acknowledgement, Meredith continued. I'm here to remind you that a daughter who wasn't loved doesn't mean she wasn't lovable. From her bag, she pulled a faded note and held it up. My grandfather wrote me this before he died. He said, don't let your kindness become your weakness. Let it be your compass. She looked at each of them, Ellen, Ethan, even Chloe, and then stepped back. I'm done waiting to be named. She walked out, coat over her arm like a cape. Not armor anymore. Just a choice. They stared as if they were seeing someone new, but she didn't turn back. A week after the memorial, Chloe called. Her voice was small, vulnerable. Mom's getting her heart checked. The doctors think she might need a procedure. I know it's a lot to ask, but if you're free, could you come? Not as a doctor, just ... as you. Meredith sat in her office for a long time after hanging up. Those last words rang louder then. They were said just as you. In the hospital room, Ellen looked smaller than Meredith had ever seen her. Her skin was pale, her eyes dull, and the machines around her beeped softly. She turned her head away when Meredith entered. Meredith sat quietly beside her. I'm not sorry about what I said at the memorial. Ellen's response was thin but steady. I wasn't expecting you to be. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ellen said, You were always like your father. Meredith blinked. It was the first time she had spoken of him in years. The way you watched people, the way you held everything in. I never knew what to do with that. I just wanted you to see me, Meredith said quietly. Not as competition, not as a mistake, just as your daughter. Ellen stared at the ceiling. I didn't know how to show love like that. Every time I looked at you, I felt ... weak, and I hated that feeling. Meredith waited, unsure whether to speak or let the silence keep unfolding. Finally, Ellen asked, Did you ever want to come home? Meredith answered honestly, I stopped thinking of this as home a long time ago. Then she added gently, But that doesn't mean I wanted to stop being your daughter. There were no grand apologies, no tearful reconciliations. But the ice cracked just enough to let a little light through. Meredith stood to leave. If that's all you have, she said, I accept it, not because it's enough, but because I won't let it keep wounding me. She placed her hand on the bed's edge. Ellen didn't grab it, but neither did she pull away. Sometimes healing wasn't about return. It was about release. 6 months later, Meredith was no longer the head of trauma surgery. She traded her pager for lesson plans and her operating gloves for whiteboard markers. She had taken a part-time faculty position at a local community college, teaching students from all walks of life. Some were single moms, others were night shift nurses hoping to advance. All of them carried the same hunger Meredith had once buried beneath ambition. On her first day, she stood in front of the class and asked, How many of you have ever been told by someone you love that you're not enough? Nearly half the room raised their hands. She nodded slowly. I've been in your seat. No one thought I'd become anything, but I did, because I believed it before anyone else did. That week, she found a letter on her desk, Chloe's handwriting. I told Mom and Dad everything about you, it read. They didn't know what to say, but I knew what to say. I'm proud to be your sister. Tucked inside was a photo. Chloe, still in her hospital gown, holding Meredith's hand. The moment had been captured without her knowing, quiet, tender, a reminder that some wounds, when properly tended, don't scar, they transform. That evening, Meredith walked home without the usual weight slung over her shoulder. The streets were the same, but she was different. She passed a small shop she'd ignored for years and went inside. A pair of soft leather gloves caught her eye. "What are you using them for?" The clerk asked. She smiled. "To teach people how to hold a scalpel. Not to fight, to heal." Back in her apartment, she reframed the photo Chloe had sent. It now hung in the center of her wall. Beneath her degrees, above her notes, she used to believe she was the shadow. But in that small corner of the world, she had become a quiet light, not one that dazzled or blinded, but one soft and steady enough to help someone else find their way. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.